about to start preparing to write my second novel. My first novel is out on submission right now, and as I've been waiting to hear what's gonna happen, I've been thinking about what my next novel will be. So I wanted to do a more casual video and just chat about where I am now, what I have learned from my first novel that I'm hoping to bring into my second, how exactly I'm prepping, and sort of my mindset going into embarking on this new project. So as I mentioned, my first novel is out on submission. It's an upmarket novel, and I got my agent in September of 2024, and we revised my book. We went through about 3 rounds of edits, and then she sent it to a number of editors at publishing houses back in June. So basically, it's just been crickets since then. We've gotten a handful of rejections, but it's been pretty silent. Summer is such a slow time for everyone, like especially in publishing. So I'm really not holding my breath. I'm hoping that we'll hear something by September or October. And I've been keeping myself busy. They always say that when you are doing anything that requires a lot of waiting, like querying an agent or your book going out on submission, you should just be working on your next project. But for me, I don't like to take on any big projects like a new draft of a novel over the summer. I live in New England. Summers are short, summers are precious. I live near the beach, and so I'm just trying to enjoy my summer as best as I can while balancing work and friends and family and all the things. I really try to embrace my summer. So I don't really like to be in that headspace, because for me, when I start a new project, I get really obsessed with it and I'm just thinking about it all the time. And even if I'm not working on it, it's just taking up so much of my brain space. In the summer, I find that I just work better when I don't have a big creative project. So I've been working on my newsletter, I have coaching clients, I've been busy, and I've been making these YouTube videos. So I definitely have had a distraction while I'm waiting to hear from my agent. But now that fall is approaching, I've been thinking more about this novel idea that I've had. I've had it for a while now, but where I was so into my first novel, like I said, me and my agent went through edits 3 times, so it was like a whole nother year of edits in addition to the 4 years it took me to write it. I don't know, I can't like compartmentalize like that. I can't be working on 2 novels at the same time. So I have just sort of had this idea on the back burner, knowing that there's gonna be a time where I will have the energy and the brain space to write the next book. So the thing about me is I don't love drafting. I am a revision girly through and through. I like working with what I already have put down on the page. So embarking on a first draft of a novel where I haven't done that in, as I said, like 5 years, it's a little scary. I'm excited, but I also know that I'm going to have to work really hard on basically practicing what I preach. I tell my coaching clients, and I also run a cohort called the Wild Draft that is all about writing your first draft. I talk so much about this being your discovery draft, following your curiosity, being playful, knowing that no one is going to see this draft, and so you can just have fun and be free on the page even when you don't know what's going to happen. That's why I call it the Wild Draft. It's messy, and it's just really figuring out what the story is. And I get so much out of teaching that, and I firmly believe it. So now I'm going to have to do it for myself again. But I have to say, even though I'm saying that I don't love to draft, I am going to be really open-minded in this new novel, because I'm a completely different writer and person than I was when I started my first novel back in 2020. So much has changed. I can actually say that I've written a whole book and got it to the point of getting an agent, and we're in the process of getting it published. Like the way that I view myself as a writer is so different than when I was, what I like to say, a baby novelist back in 2020, when I was just teaching myself how to do this. And I know that every book is going to be different, and every book is going to teach you how to write it, but I am going into this with just like a little bit more confidence, because I know that I've actually been able to write a novel and finish one. But I will keep internalizing and keep telling myself that this is the discovery draft. This is about following my excitement and seeing how the story unfolds. I actually did a whole nother video on my drafting and revising process for my first novel, which I'll link in the cards if you're interested in seeing that. But one of the things I talked about there was not outlining or not feeling the need to outline if I didn't want to. And I'm definitely taking that into this new novel. As I mentioned, I sort of know what it's going to be about. I have an idea. I think I have possibly the structure in my head. I know some of the characters a little bit. I haven't named them yet, which is like, names are a big thing for me, so this is why it's a discovery draft. But I do know some things, and I just don't really feel like I know enough to outline, and I don't want to have that containment and that structure right now where I'm just going to be writing and like figuring out what the story is about. So outlining worked really well for me after probably 4 or 5 drafts in my last book. So I'll be curious if I feel the need to come back to that during this one at all. And I'm just gonna kind of see how it goes and go from there, but I'm not gonna be outlining before I start writing. So something else I learned when writing my first novel that I'm absolutely taking into account when I'm writing my second is to reduce outside noise. And what I mean by that is outside voices, lessons, and opinions. I learned the hard way when I was writing my first book that reading a ton of craft books during that like precious tender time of first, second, even third drafts was hindering my practice rather than enriching it. I was just getting so stuck in what other people were saying my book should look like or how I should approach things that I sort of lost track of how I wanted to do it. And that whole holding it all loosely discovery curiosity draft felt so stressful because I felt like I needed to know so much in that first draft. And now after going through it, there is so much beauty in learning more and more about the story with each draft. It's just every draft is peeling back a layer. And if you can stay in that process, or rather, talking to myself here, if I can stay in that process and not be obsessed with what this book should be or could be or what others have done before me, I'm able to find the authenticity of my own story so much better and without all of the stress. So I'm really going to take the time to protect my creative energy. I know what types of things I want to be consuming as far as like outside inspiration or books, but I'm really going to protect my time and my energy when it comes to writing this first draft. I'm gonna get a little more into how I'm prepping, but I know that reducing any outside noise works well for me at this stage. Okay, so here's how I'm actually prepping to start writing my book in a few weeks. One of the best things that I ever discovered when I was writing my first book was a book called The 90-Day Novel by Alan Watt. So I know it sounds really gimmicky, but it is so helpful. And I was reminded by my writing partner how helpful this was when I was writing my first book. And for some reason, I just sort of thought like, since I've already done this, I didn't need this again. And maybe need is a strong word, but I was like, this helped me so much, why wouldn't I use it again? So what this book is all about is what I was talking about earlier about holding it all loosely, your discovery draft. And the reason why he says you can write it in 90 days is because you're writing 1,000 words a day and you're not being super rigid. You're just treating it as this playful discovery draft so that you have something that has a beginning, middle, and an end that you can then reshape in revisions, because as we all know, the revisions are endless. So I'm gonna just start getting into this book again. In the beginning, it's less about writing the actual words of the book and more about discovering who your character is. And as I mentioned, I don't know the names of my main characters, which is really important to me. I know a little bit about them, but I don't know enough. And I don't feel like I have the voice in my head or know enough about them to actually start typing out like dialogue or anything. So I'm gonna start with this. So when I say start with this, I'm saying that there's a lot of exercises in here, such as write for 5 minutes, beginning with the most incredible thing I ever did was, or the turning point in my life was everything makes sense and you're writing in the voice of your protagonist. And this is coming from someone who hates writing prompts, but there's something about the questions in this book that really unlock what I needed to figure out who my main character was in my first book, and I want to see if it works again for my second. I don't know if I'm going to use it for the full 90 days. I don't know how long I'm going to be answering these prompts, but I do know I'm just going to try for at least a couple writing sessions and see what happens. So another thing I love to do when I'm preparing to write anything, but especially a novel, is read other novels. And since my second novel is going to explore sisterhood and siblings, I have been trying to read more books that feature those. So the books that I have read so far are The Shred Sisters by Betsy Lerner, so good. I also have read Girls with Long Shadows by Tennessee Hill. I also just finished El Dorado Drive by Megan Abbott. That was sort of more of a thriller, but it explored two sisters' relationships. So anything that kind of gets my brain working in those spaces is always helpful. I also have a forthcoming book that a friend recommended to me. What is it called? Fireworks Every Night by Beth Raymer. I will definitely be picking that up from the library soon. And if you have any sister books that you love, definitely let me know, because I find that while I'm drafting and while I'm doing these exercises from the 90-day novel, I want to be reading. I love reading. It's a huge part of my process, and reading books that explore a similar vibe or a similar theme always help me. I love having books that end up being sort of my North Star books for the novel. So I'm interested to see which ones those are gonna be, but as of right now, I'm just on the hunt for sisterhood books. Something else I plan on doing that I did with my first book is I created a mood board on Pinterest. Now, before you roll your eyes, it's so fun. As you know, stories never come to you fully formed, but I think that the vibe of the story and possibly some themes, some images always do. That's what gets you wanting to start writing the book. And finding pictures that you can reference and look at is such a fun part of the process for me anyway. So what I ended up doing last time is I ended up printing out a bunch of pictures that I found on Pinterest and sort of collaging them on my wall in front of my writing desk. So every time I was ready to get into writing, get myself into this drafting mode, I had a visual that I could look at and sort of daydream or just get inspiration from the pictures. Sometimes you look at something, especially when it's an aesthetically pleasing picture like you can find on Pinterest, and you just want to try to capture that in words. And that helped me so much. And it's been really cool to look back at my first mood board back from 2020 when I wrote it and compare it to what the book looks like now and see that the vibes that inspired me to write the book and that filled me with excitement still stayed in that draft. It was such a cool discovery. I recently shared this with my students in the Wild Draft and encouraged them to do the same, and I will absolutely be doing it for the second novel. In addition to a mood board, I know I will eventually create a playlist. I think it's too early right now, but as I'm listening to music and thinking about this book and taking time to daydream about it on my walks, because that is a huge part of the process, I know I'm going to be listening for songs that capture certain scenes, certain moments, again, the vibe of the book. I, again, did that with my first book, and I listened to the playlist over and over again whenever I was feeling blocked or stuck or really needed to get into certain scenes with certain characters, and it was amazing, life-changing, could not write the book without it. So I'm very curious to see what the playlist will be for this second book. I think that it's too early right now, but I'm going to have my ears peaked for what could potentially be on that playlist. You can only prep so much, but what you can definitely prep for is your time. And for me, as I mentioned, summer has been busy but lazy in the ways that summers are, and that's why I love them. And I'm definitely going to have to find the time to write. And for me, what has worked in the past is designating an hour a day, Monday through Friday, when I'm working on a project like this. So my goal is to write this draft relatively quickly. I don't want to spend too much time second guessing myself or getting stuck in my head. I want to just move forward. I don't know how long that's going to take me. There is also the caveat of I'm going to rephrase that. When my book sells, my first one, I don't know what that's gonna look like. I don't know if we're gonna start editing again right away or if I'll be plunged back into that world. So I need to sort of give myself grace that that is something that could happen in the middle of writing this draft. But if nothing happens and it's still silent and we're still waiting and I'm just full-fledged into this project, I like to designate 1 hour, if not a little bit more, Monday through Friday as my writing time. And so that means I'm going to have to be intentional with my schedule. I'm really lucky that I work from home and that I am self-employed, so I can figure out my schedule however I want. But even still, where I have all these other responsibilities, it's very easy to move writing to the last thing of the day because it's not the most productive, or it's not the thing that's gonna give me money, or however you wanna categorize it. I need to be really intentional and I need to be precious about when my writing time is so that I actually get it done. So in this prep phase, in this thinking about the novel, reading the 90-day novel, making my mood board, taking notes, I'm also going to be thinking about how exactly I'm going to structure my day to accommodate my writing time, which is just as important as all my other work. So even though I'm so enthusiastic about this, I do still have some fears that I'm working through. For example, I think this book might end up being a dual timeline story, which I have never attempted. It feels like a very big task since I know that the two timelines, say if it ends up being the present timeline and the past timeline, need to both have their own arcs and need to both intersect in a specific way and forward the story, give it momentum, all the mechanics, and where I have never done this before, it can be a little scary. I also think that this book might be a little bit more research heavy. I don't know for sure, but I think it might be taking place in the 70s and 80s. And so I'm going to have to be doing a lot of research on that. I don't know exactly the place it's going to be, but I know it won't be in New England where I live. So I'm going to have to research setting, and all of those things are exciting and fun. But of course they do kind of take up my brain space of, can I do this? But since this is the first draft, I'm not going to distract myself with all of the nitty gritty of research. That can come later. I'm just going to keep writing it. But I do want to be honest about these kind of things because I think that even if you've done something like write a novel, the next one is inevitably going to have challenges that you've never encountered. You're going to continue to be learning stuff about yourself that you didn't know. You're going to be taking creative risks and leaps and bounds. And I think that even though this is something I want to do and I love to do, there always is going to be a little bit of fear around it and a little bit of self-doubt or imposter syndrome. So just because I've written one novel doesn't mean that I'm going into this other one completely confident. So if you're starting something new, let me know in the comments. I would love to know what your new project is, how you're feeling going into it, how you're preparing, and just know that you are not alone. I'm here with you, we're doing it together, and I'm excited to see how it all turns out. And if you're already in the middle of your novel, but you're feeling stuck, I made a video for you, which you can find here. It's all about 1-minute quick fixes to improve your novel, deepen your scenes, strengthen your characters, or just get words on the page. So I'll see you over there or in my next one. Bye.